friends, welcome back to our channel if you've seen our videos before. If you're new here, my name is Abby. Happy New Year! Let's talk about some books. So as you can tell by the title and such, today I'm going to be talking about my favorite reads, the top reads in my opinion, that I read in 2023. Let me just say, this list was hard to make. I was gonna make top 10, and my sister Hope will attest. I was having a full mental breakdown about it. Trying to get all of my favorite things into only 10 things is not enough. So I did 15. So we're gonna be talking about 15 of my favorite reads this year because 10 was just not enough. I read too many good things this year. I ended up finishing 130 books in 2023, which is my most ever, and I'm feeling quite proud of myself for that. Out of those 130, 52 of them were 5 stars, which tells you I had a lot to choose from. Now, a lot of those were rereads, and me personally, I don't count rereads in my top books of the year if it's like a second time reading it or something, just because that's just the way I do it. But I found some really great books this year, and I'm so excited to talk to you about them. Not all of them came out this year, some of them did, but they are books that I read for the first time this year. So let's chat about them. So I think we're just gonna start with the top of the list because these are the like 4 or 5 that I feel confident, like these were my favorite books. The rest are like, I don't know how in order they stack up, I just loved them all a lot. But the first few I definitely know go in this order. So the first book, my favorite book of the year, I mentioned this in my tier ranking of all the classics that I read because I really didn't think anything was gonna beat Pride and Prejudice. And I was correct. This is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I read this in April. I fell madly in love with it. I loved it so much. This is a classic, of course, so you probably already know what it's about, but in case you don't, we follow Elizabeth Bennet, who has several sisters, and a handsome young man moves into the neighborhood, and Elizabeth's mother decides that she's going to marry one of her daughters off to this man, and maybe also his rich handsome friend, but his rich handsome friend is a guy named Darcy who really does not do well in public situations or meeting new people. So he and Elizabeth don't hit it off super well, but over the course of the novel we come to get to know Darcy a little bit better and we understand more of where he's coming from, and so does Elizabeth. And it is iconic for a reason. It is so great. I really loved this, and I'm so glad I did. It's one that I've been meaning to read for ages and just never got around to, and finally this year I was like, I think it's time, and I loved it so much. You already know this book is great. I don't need to pitch it to you. Like, you already know. This is great. Number 2, my second favorite book of the year, another classic novel that I talked about in my tier ranking, and that is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. This is a book that I don't think I could recommend readily to everyone. It's definitely not going to work for everybody, but something about it worked really well for me. This year I read this for the first time in March, I believe. I flew through this almost 500-page novel in like 48 hours. It was insane. I literally could not put it down. Every time I wasn't reading about it, I was thinking about it, and so I was consumed by this novel. As soon as I finished it, I was like, oh, I wish I had annotated it, but I didn't want to the first time through in case I didn't like it, and then I ended up with like an annotated book, but I loved it so much that I read it again in June. So I've read this one twice this year, and I absolutely loved it so much. This is a true coming of age story. Like, oftentimes we hear that thrown around, but this is one that I really feel like fits that category. We follow Francie. She's 11 or 12 when we first meet her in the first chapter, and then we kind of go through her life over the course of her until she's like 18 or so by the time the book is done. We also learn about her parents and her brother and her grandparents and just what it means to grow up in turn-of-the-century Brooklyn. It's kind of autobiographical in feeling. It feels very nostalgic and real and hard. It's got some tough subject matter in this book, but it is just something about it just captivated me this year, and I loved it so much. Kind of want to read it again, but I read it twice, so I need to put it off for a little longer because it's a long one, but I love it so much. And this definitely had to go number 2. Number 3, I think you can tell how obsessed with it I was just by the number of those tabbies. Can you see that? That's insane. The Notorious Scarlett and Browne. by Jonathan Stroud. This is the sequel to The Outlaws, Scarlett and Browne, which was one of my favorite books of last year, which I did reread this year in January because this one was coming out this year. This is genuinely one of the best sequels I've ever read. Hands down, period. I'm obsessed with it. I love the character choices. I love the world building. I love the plot. Like, the way the plot ramps up in this novel is insanity. I love Jonathan Stroud. Lockwood & Co. is very near and dear to my heart, but I think, depending how book 3 goes, Scarlett and Browne might take the top spot of my favorite Jonathan Stroud series. I loved the first one. I love this one even more. Again, the tabs can attest. Like, I loved this book. It's so funny and witty and yet so heartfelt, and this one is so intense. Like, there's this massive, like, there's a lot of big questions raised in this book as a sequel. A lot of them get answered, but some of them are just kind of left to linger for book 3, which I could not be more excited for. We don't know anything about it yet, but I'm so incredibly excited. I loved this book so much. So much. I'm gonna try to stop saying I loved this book so much, but it's gonna be hard, man. These are my favorite books of the year. I loved them. This next one, I'm gonna count as 1, even though technically it was 3, but I do have a bind-up edition that has them all in one, so we're gonna count it. And I know Tolkien kind of wanted them to be read as one big story, so The Lord of the Rings takes my number 4 spot. I read this for the first time this year, and I absolutely loved it. Again, the tabs can attest. Hopefully you can see all of that. The blue ones are Fellowship, the yellow is Two Towers, and then the pink is Return of the King, because this is, again, like I said, a bind-up. I ended up, like, annotating this one with, like, highlighters, too, which was my first time doing that, and I did different colors. I'm trying not to spoil anything. I did different colors for each book, so Two Towers is orange, and then Return of the King is pink. Return of the King is pink. So I really enjoyed doing that. This was a very fun project I did for myself this summer. I read these this summer. I read one a month, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Genuinely, like, I was obsessed with this story, this world, these characters, and I'm so glad this was another one that had been on my list for so long, like practically my whole life, because I've been obsessed with Narnia forever and ever, and I feel like a lot of the time, if you're a Narnia fan, you're probably also a Lord of the Rings fan, or vice versa, but I just had never read the books. And now I've done that. And I feel A, very accomplished, and B, I really loved them, so I'm really happy that I loved them so much. Number 5 came in right in the last minute. I read this in December, and that is Kling, Klang, Gloria by Jenny Sauer. Now, Jenny is one of my favorite authors, and Rook-to-Goo is my favorite book of hers, so this released this year, this is the sequel to Rook-to-Goo, and it was perfection. It was absolutely perfect. I don't think it's gonna work for everyone, but it was absolutely perfect for me. As the world's #1 Rook-to-Goo stan, this book was perfect for that. The first book is a Cinderella retelling, and this one is some more obscure fairy tales, Maid Maylene and King Thrushbeard. This series I like to call soft sci-fi. It's like very warm and lovely and just kind of weirdly like slice of life storytelling, but it's in a sci-fi universe. This particular story, we follow Zia, and she was put into cryosleep 7 years ago due to choices that she made and her father's reaction to those choices. She wakes up 7 years later and finds that war has torn through her city. The palace is gone, her father is dead, nothing looks the way it did when she went to sleep, and she meets a man named Thrush, who tells her that he was sent or tasked by her father to be there when she wakes up to take care of her. There's a lot of secrets and a lot of flashbacks to the time before she went to sleep, and it's just a lot of like Zia finding her purpose in life, what she wants to do with her life now that what she thought she had to do is gone. Like, she gets to make the choice now, and it's up to her to kind of decide what she wants to do. And it was just perfection. There's also pretty great cameos from the Rook-to-Goo characters, which I think might have upped my enjoyment, I can't lie. But I did really love this story as well. It's kind of got like second chance romance vibes, very like soft, dislike to love, like we kind of bother each other, but we kind of are falling in love dynamics, which I personally eat up every time. And I need to have my physical copy. I don't have one yet and it's driving me a little nuts. I want to like go in and annotate and draw in it, and I want to make it mine, but I don't have it yet, but I'm working on it. Number 6, I think, is one that y'all will probably love if, like me, you love a rom-com and you love a murder mystery. This is Juniper Bean Resorts to Murder by Gracie Ruth Mitchell, and this is the cutest murder mystery I've ever read in my life. I love a rom-com, I love a murder mystery, so the mashup of those two things is perfection, and this was so delightful. This one came out in the spring, or like February, I can't exactly remember, but the sequel, Heidi Lucy Loses Her Mind, also came out this year. I've also read that one. I loved that one too. I think Juniper won my heart just a little bit more. This was an absolute delight. It was so much fun, and you wouldn't normally say that about a murder mystery, but something about the way Gracie Ruth Mitchell wrote this book is just adorable. So in this book, we follow Juniper Bean. She is a writer. She writes like fluffy rom-com novels, but she has recently decided to branch out and write a murder mystery. And she's also moving, and she moves into her childhood like hometown and moves into a house with a guy named Aiden, who is her new roommate. What Aiden doesn't know is that he has always been Juniper's first love, and she hasn't ever really lost that spark of love for him, but also she's trying to write this murder mystery for the first time and like figure out how it all works when she stumbles upon an actual dead body and has to figure out how to solve the case, because the police seem like they're not really doing what they should be doing in Juniper's estimation to try and solve the crime. So she and Aiden kind of team up to solve the case and also maybe fall in love. I've laughed out loud so many times while reading this. I really, really loved it. And yeah, this is another one I definitely want to read again soon. I might read this one in January actually, because I have found that starting my reading year off with a reread works out every time. Number 7 is another one that I unfortunately don't have a copy of yet, but I probably will be getting one soon, and that is Keeper of Enchanted Rooms by Charlie N. Holmberg. I found this one, I don't even remember where I got this. Somehow it ended up free on my Kindle, and one day I just decided to read it because, I don't know, I've been trying to get into my Kindle backlog. It's embarrassingly large how many books I own on my Kindle that I haven't read. So I was trying to like chip away at it slowly, which is how I read Juniper Bean as well the first time. So I picked this one up kind of on a whim and then figured out that it's like the perfect book for me. Like it's everything. So this is a historical fantasy novel, which is my personal favorite like subgenre of fantasy at the moment where I'm at in my life. Historical fantasy and we jive. So this is set in the 1840s, and we meet Merritt Fernsby, who has recently inherited this house from a distant relation. He's kind of down on his luck. He's also a writer, I think. Journalist, writer. No, he writes novels. He writes novels, or short stories. And he's kind of down on his luck. He's having a bad time. He's just gotten kicked out of his rental, and he inherits this house, and he's like, oh great, I'll just move into the house because it's a free house and like I could live there, so I'm going to. It's kind of like on the outskirts of Rhode Island. It's like a pretty secluded rural spot. He moves into the house, and then it seems like the house really doesn't want him there. The house starts like eating his wallet and getting him stuck in doorways and like dropping him into the basement at random times. So Merritt, of course, is a little off-put by this, and as he's like having a moment trying to figure out what to do, he opens the door and finds Huldah Larkin standing on the doorstep, who is our second main character. Huldah works for the Boston Institute for the Keeping of Enchanted Rooms, or Biker for short, and they basically go around and take care of magical houses. Sometimes they hire in housekeepers who have magic or can help deal with the house's magic, and Huldah's job in this particular case is to figure out how the house is enchanted. Like, is it a ghost? Is it haunted? Is it like a wizard's spirit? Was it a wizard's house and all the magic has just been kind of left in the house? Like, there's a lot of options. The magic system in this novel is so interesting and like very detailed. I have also read the sequel, and it was just as good. I think I preferred the first one just a little bit, but I am so excited for book 3 coming this year. I just fell in love with this entire story. It's very cozy. It's got like big found family energy as the kind of crew to take care of this house kind of comes together, as Huldah's trying to figure out how the house is enchanted, why the house is enchanted, what kind of secrets it's holding, and also Merritt and Huldah maybe kind of fall in love a little. And also there's like a big evil guy who's trying to steal the magic from the house. It's a lot. There's a lot going on. I don't want to say too much because just the journey of discovering this novel was so delightful to me that I don't want to like steal that from you. So if you like historical fantasy at all, if you love like cozy found family stories, I definitely think you should try out Keeper of Enchanted Rooms. It was so cute. Next up, we are at number 8 on my list. This one I read way back in February, and this was my Valentine's Day read for myself, and I found it was so delightful. This is called A Heart Worth Stealing by Joanna Barker. This was my first Joanna Barker, but it certainly will not be my last. I've already read another one from her in 2023, but I'm definitely planning to pick up more in the future. This is another one that's kind of got rom-com energy, but there's also a sort of a mystery going on. In this one, we follow Genevieve. It is 1802. She lives in England. Her father has recently passed away. She is trying to like get his affairs in order and like run the estate herself. She was his only child. She's a single girl. She's just trying to like make it all work. Her father's pocket watch goes missing and she has reason to believe that it was stolen, but a lot of the men around her are like, you're crazy, that's not a thing. So she takes her own initiative and goes out to hire a thief taker, which is like the Bow Street Runners, like early, it was like pre-Scotland Yard, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. It's like what Scotland Yard, or what became Scotland Yard. And she meets one of the thief takers, whose name is Jack, and he is my favorite part of this book. I love him so much. He's like sassy and sarcastic, but also like really cares a lot and is very careful and very protective, and I love him so much. They kind of don't jive at first, but he's like really determined to get this job done, and stuff goes down and drama ensues, and I don't want to say too much. This is another one I want to read again, I think probably next year, because I loved it a lot. Next up, another one that snuck on here real close to the end. Like I was like, oh great, I can like put my list together for the best of the year, and then Jenny Sauer and Autumn Krause were like, no you can't, because you haven't read ours yet. So anyway, this is Before the Devil Knows You're Here by Autumn Krause. This is such a pleasant surprise to me because I really didn't know how I was gonna feel about it. I did have an ARC of this, so I did get to read it for free, which was very exciting, and then I went and I bought the hardcover because look at this book. Look at this book. Look at the foiling. And then when you take the dust jacket off, are you ready for this? I can't get it off. Look at this! With all the apple blossoms, and then on the back it's got the apple being like eaten. It's so pretty. I'm so happy I have this now. This book is the most like delicious gothic fairy tale that I've ever read. It's pretty short. It's like just over 200 pages. It's very short. It's just like bite-sized, you might say, but don't eat the apples. The apple will kill you. This is another one that's kind of historical fantasy. It's set in the 1830s in Wisconsin. Catalina lives with her father and her brother. They're trying to do the farming thing. It's not going super well, but one day 3 shiny, beautiful apples show up on their front porch, and her father freaks out a little bit, destroys the apples, and reminds her of the stories that he has told them about the man of sap. And if you eat his apples, let me quote the inside of the cover, you die with an apple on your lips, music in your ears, and his image before your eyes. And he gives you a cursed apple, and then you eat it and you die, and it's a bad time. We kind of get to see Catalina's point of view as things start going very badly for her family very quickly after these apples have appeared. And also we get a secondary point of view from a man called John Chapman, because yes, this is, in fact, a Johnny Appleseed retelling, which is something that I have never seen before, but I absolutely loved so much. So John is the man of sap. He's telling us his story throughout this novel and how he got to be where he is and what he is, and it is just delicious. I don't want to say too much about the story of this because I feel like it's one you just have to go in and experience it yourself. But it feels like a classic dark Grimm's fairy tale story. Like, it's an original fairy tale is kind of what it feels like. The writing style is so gorgeous and beautiful and delicious, and I consumed this so quickly, and I want to read it again. I might be able to put it off till Halloween time because it would be a perfect Halloween time read, but I might also have to do it sooner than that. We'll see. Next up, number 10 on my list. This is In Spotlight and Shadow by Rachel Scott McDaniel. I really struggled, let me tell you this, because one of the rules that I make for myself, this is just my brain and my rules, I can only pick one book per author on my top 10 at the end of the year, just because I feel like a lot of the time I will binge an author's backlist and then it would just be all that one author, if that makes sense. So in the case of this year, I really struggled because Rachel Scott McDaniel released this one in February. I absolutely loved, but she also released The Scarlet Spy this year, and I devoured this book. It was so good. So I think if you're looking for like clean mystery romance that's just gonna absorb you and have you reading every single page because you need to know what's gonna happen next, Rachel Scott McDaniel is your girl. These are the second and third books I've read from her, and I am very excited to read more of her backlist in the coming year. And also she has a new book coming out in 2024 that I am very excited for. But Spotlight and Shadow I read in February, and I put in my Goodreads review, well, I've already found one of my favorite books of the year, so I knew this had to make it on the list. This is a split time mystery. So we have two storylines that we're following. That's the split time of the mystery. In the modern storyline, we are following Elise. She's trying to find herself in like a new stage of life. She finds a necklace while she's helping archive at this theater. She finds this necklace and she's like, something is up with this necklace. It's got like something's going on here. And then we flash back in time to the 1920s and we follow Sophie. Sophie is struggling because someone is stealing jewels. She's an actress, she's working on the stage, and someone is stealing things from the patrons of this theater. So into Sophie's life walks her ex she left at the altar, who is a police detective and has been assigned to this case. And so Sophie has to figure out like who's stealing the stuff and also how she feels about Sterling. Love of my life, Sterling Monroe. And then in the modern storyline, Elise is also trying to figure out like she's trying to solve the case as well, and she gets some help from her childhood friend, country music legend Pearson Brooks, who is back in town. And yeah, so it's two second chance romances. It's a mystery, and it's just so much fun. I really have loved discovering Rachel Scott McDaniel over the past couple of years, and I am so excited to get into more of her backlist in 2024. I've got several on my list that I'm excited to get to, so yes. Coming in at number 11, this was the new release this year from one of my favorite authors, Caroline George, and that is Curses and Other Buried Things. It came out around my birthday, and actually this pre-order showed up on my birthday, so it was like, happy birthday to me. This is maybe not my favorite of Caroline's novels. I still think Dearest Josephine just has my whole heart, but this book is so beautiful and so beautifully done. This is another one that's kind of a split time mystery. I didn't realize that was such a recurring theme in this year for me, but here we are. In this book we follow Susanna. There has always been kind of this curse on the women in her family, and she's always known that it's a thing that is probably going to end up taking her one day. She turns 18 right at the beginning of this book, and for most of the other women, including her mother, started the countdown to when they go crazy and the swamp claims them. I don't want to give too much away because it is such a slow building reveal to like what's actually going on in this novel that I don't want to say too much. But basically Susanna is trying to figure out how to avoid the curse as long as possible. She's doing so with the help of a lot of her childhood friends. The friend group in here, so good. And then we also get flashbacks to Susanna's great-grandmother, great-great-great-grandmother, excuse me, in 1855, Susanna Yawn. They're like pieces of the past, and as you keep going throughout this novel, it kind of puts pieces together from what we know of the modern storyline, and it's just fascinating. It is a fascinating story and so well paced and well told. It was just really beautiful, and I really, really liked this. And also, again, this cover is just stunning. I don't know if you're gonna really be able to pick up like all the animals on here, but it's so beautiful. Complete change of vibe from that last book. Number 12 is The Letter Tree by Rachel Fordham. This was my first Rachel Fordham. I read this from NetGalley this year, and it was such a pleasant surprise. I requested this one on NetGalley because the pitch sounded really good, and then I just fully was obsessed with it, and I couldn't put it down, and it was just so for me. and I loved it so much. So this book is pitched as Romeo and Juliet meets You've Got Mail, and I was like, yes please. I need that in my life. And I was right, it was everything. I am a sucker for anonymous pen pal romance, and I think if, like me, you were obsessed with what's going to be my number 13 book, I'm going to give you a little sneaky peeky. If you loved this year, read The Letter Tree. I think you will love it too. This is straight up historical fiction set in 1924 in Buffalo, New York, and we follow Laura Bradshaw, and her father owns like a shoe company, like a pretty successful shoe company, but he has this rivalry with his ex-partner slash nemesis, Mr. Campbell. So as her father's only daughter, Laura kind of knows that she's probably just gonna like get married off to like some socialite and like have to live this socialite life that she doesn't really love. She'd kind of just rather, you know, live a nice quiet life, marry somebody she loves, and read her books. And that somebody she loves may or may not be the guy to whom she has been leaving letters in the tree at the zoo. They've been leaving pen pal letters back and forth for like 7 years at the point when the story starts, and she's kind of fallen for him, but she doesn't actually know who he is. However, we the readers do know who he is, and his name is Isaac Campbell, the son of her father's nemesis. And they've been leaving these anonymous letters to each other for like 7 years. They don't know that it's the other one. Enemies to lovers romance is not my personal, I don't really jive with it very often, but this whole kind of like, our parents have beef, but like we don't really. So like technically we should be enemies, but like you're kind of cool and I like you still as a person. It's a good vibe for me. I enjoy it very much. I read it in like 2 days. I just couldn't put it down. I just wanted to know what was gonna happen next. And I absolutely loved it so, so much. And every time I think back on it, like I wasn't sure if it was gonna rank this high amongst my like favorite books of the year, but every time I think back on reading it, I get like warm fuzzy feelings inside. And it just makes me happy. So yeah, I think it deserves a spot on this list, and I'm definitely going to be checking out more Rachel Fordham books in the future, for sure. Speaking of anonymous pen pal romances, listen, I am a softie for an anonymous pen pal romance. I don't know why, I don't know what it is about it, but it gets me every time, and it got everybody else with this one this year as well, because I don't know if there's going to be many lists this year that don't have divine rivals on them. If you read YA fantasy in any capacity, you probably have heard about this book, and you've probably read it, or at least have it on your radar. I would recommend it, so I can't disagree with the masses on this one. I really, really loved this as well. This is by Rebecca Ross. If you haven't heard what this one is about, this follows Iris and Roman. It's kind of like this, it's fantasy. It's got very like 1910s, 1920s energy to the world building. Like they write on typewriters and they work for a newspaper, but also like there's magic involved in very various ways throughout the story. So we follow Iris. She works at this newspaper and she is really gunning for this editor, top journalist position, columnist promotion. So it says in the synopsis, and she wants to like get the better jobs and get the better pay because she is the only one in her family currently working, so she's like keeping a roof over her and her mother's head. Her brother went off to fight in the war that's like going on. That's very like World War I inspired. It's definitely giving that energy, but it's got like magic and gods involved and stuff, like I said, so it's a little bit different. But Iris has this nemesis at work called Roman, who is also gunning for the same position, but he's actually like pretty chill. And this is the thing about like rivals to lovers romance, and like they weren't the most like rival people, like they kind of got along okay. They just were both going for the same position. So I don't even know, like I've seen some people saying this is like enemies to lovers. No, it's not. It's not. So Iris has this thing that she's kind of done for a long time where she will write her own like journal entries, thoughts, and like just her opinions on things, and she will write them down and she slides them under her magic wardrobe door and they disappear. She doesn't know where they go. She's never known where they go. But one day the person she's been writing to writes back. And she doesn't know it, but we do because we're the readers and we get to know everything. But it is in fact Roman who is her nemesis at the paper and is honestly madly in love with her, if I'm remembering correctly. Like he's down bad. Like pretty quickly. I don't want to spoil it for anybody who wants to like go on this adventure. It truly is an adventure, and it's also got like just the softest romance between these two. And I absolutely loved this. Very nervous and excited for book 2. We shall see what it does to my heart. Number 14, this is another sequel. I read a lot of sequels this year that made it onto this list, I'm now noticing, but I'm not complaining about it. They were really, really great. This is The Herbwitch Princess by Irene Chow. Again, with this cover, it is so stunning. This particular edition, and actually most of the paperback editions that you get now, are also illustrated. So beautiful. I adore Irene so much as a human. I've been following her for a while now, and I really loved book 1 in this series, which is The Herbwitch's Apprentice. I read this whole thing in a day, and I liked it a totally normal amount, as you can see by the sheer number of tabs in this book. I loved this so much. I devoured it, and it was so good. I loved it so much. So I don't want to spoil too much because kind of talking about this book spoils a bit of the first book, but I do want to say that this is kind of a redemption arc for a character from the first book that I wasn't sure if I was going to love, but then I ended up absolutely loving, and I'm kind of curious now to like go back and reread the first book. I might read them both in 2024 again, but see how I feel about her from that book, because I love her now, but like, will I feel that way in the first book? I don't know, but this is like very soft romance. These books give all the energy of like the early Barbie movies. So if like Princess and the Pauper, 12 Dancing Princesses, Rapunzel, if that's your Barbie era, you should check these out. I think you will love them. It's like an arranged marriage situation, but they both secretly love each other, and that's very cute, and I love them very much. The main character in here can also talk to animals, so like her best friend is her cat Misty, and they like have conversations. And Misty's iconic and we love her. There's also like political shenanigans going on. Like there's definitely a plot, but like the important part is the romance. Right. Number 15 of my favorite books this year was A Bond of Briars by Erin Phillips. Another one that I was eagerly anticipating this entire year, and I absolutely loved. This is the second book that I've read from Erin, and this one is a fantasy retelling, fantasy reimagining of the biblical account of Ruth. A Crown of Chains is the first book from her that I read, which is based on Esther, but I loved this one even more, which I kind of knew I would, but I'm so glad I was right. So this follows Katrin, who has been fairly recently widowed when our story starts, and she, through various, there's various secrets and reasons, but she ends up accompanying her mother-in-law to a new living situation. I mean, it's the Book of Ruth, so if you know the biblical account of Ruth, that's the setup. This book takes it, spices it up a little, because in this book, Katrin is a Carlin. Can't remember how to say it. There's a pronunciation guide in the front of this book, which was a lifesaver, but it's all very like Scottish inspired, so there's a lot of like beautiful, beautiful language used in this book, but I'm like, I don't know how to say any of it. But basically, she's a witch, basically, but Katrin's never really like dabbling in that part of herself. She knows it's her heritage, but like, it takes blood, and it's like a blood sacrifice to get stuff. She never really liked it, never really wanted to do it, but she's moving to this place where her kind of people are outlawed. Magic is banned, it's not allowed. And she also runs into a gentleman named Callan, who is the love of my life. He is an absolute sweetheart. I love him so much. And there's like another romance, but this one is pretty plot heavy, and then the romance is also there. It's very much like a self-exploration story for Katrin, and I loved it so much, and I'm so glad that I loved it as much as I expected I would. I love it when a book lives up to expectations. Isn't that the best? So that is it. Those are my top 15 reads of 2023. I would love to know in a comment down below if you have a favorite book, or like a top 10, top 5, top 10, whatever. However many favorite books you had this year, please let me know what they are in the comments down below. I would love to chat all things bookish with you. I hope you found some great things in 2023, and I cannot wait to see what we all find to read in 2024. So if you liked this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. You can subscribe down below if you want to see more videos from me, and I will see you guys in the next one.